This is not going to take too long, but in case you guys have never seen it, or if you have seen it, you don't really know what we're doing. I'm just going to give you a little bit of a lead up, and then Billy's going to do a thing here. Billy's going to be doing this demo. I'm just talking about it. The American Bladesmith Society is the oldest forging bladesmithing organization in the world. We're still the largest, and one of the things that makes us unique is that we have these set of standards that we require of people. Knives have become popular, in case y'all hadn't noticed, and there's a lot of people out there who say, I've been doing this for so many years, or I'm a master of this, or a master of that, and it is not a definitive thing that we do. It is imperfect, and it is a flawed system, but it is a system that maintains a certain level of standards, so that if you can say you're an ABS Journeyman Smith or an ABS Mastersmith, it doesn't mean everything, but it means something. And so when a guy's getting ready to test for Journeyman, the test occurs in two parts. The second part of this test is going to be done in Atlanta, Georgia at the knife show, and Billy would have to submit 5 knives that have to be certain parameters before a panel of 7 judges who are all mastersmiths, and they will look over his knives and decide whether he meets the standards or not. It's very hard to explain this verbally without trying to show examples, but I will say that for most people, not just in the world, but most people in the know, a passing Journeyman Smith level knife at this point is probably the nicest knife you've ever seen. Like, it is an incredibly, incredibly high standard. Mastersmith has gotten to the point where it's almost hard to describe how good things need to be. The requirements are very, very hard. I said this last year. I'm glad I got my Mastersmith 18 years ago, because I'm not sure. Well, I know my knives from 18 years ago wouldn't pass now, but you know, even making passing knives now is a different thing. So what we're doing here is the performance test, which is the first part. That makes sure that a guy who has a Journeyman Smith stamp on his knives is not just a guy who can make a pretty knife, he's the guy that can make a high-performing knife. This test is not designed as a way to show what all knives should be capable of. That's not the point. The point is, can you make a knife that is able to do 3 distinctly different things in the same package? So what Billy's going to do is he's going to have to cut a piece of 1-inch diameter hemp rope, free hanging, approximately 6 inches or less from the end, okay, in one swing in midair. Now, if anybody has a pocket knife, and we're not doing this, but if anybody has a pocket knife and would like to come up and try to cut this rope, I promise you it would take you a minute to get through it. And so he has to cut it in one lick in midair. So he has to be capable of making a knife that is incredibly sharp. And I will be honest, this takes a little bit of skill. So people have to practice to get good at this. You can have an incredibly sharp knife and still not be able to do this. Not that there's a trick, but there is some skill involved. After he does that, he's going to have to cut through this 2x4 twice, chop through it twice. There's a lot of ways to do it. You can do it up here in a vise. You can do it down on the ground. You can put it in a jig. After he gets done cutting this 2x4, the knife has to be capable of shaving hair from his arms, not mine, because somewhere in my history I must be Native American, because I have no body hair. And if it can't shave hair, if it can't cut this rope, if he can't cut this rope, I can try. And if I can't cut this rope, the knife fails. If he cuts through this board 2 times, and the knife has any visible damage to the edge, any chips, cracks, rolls, or flat spots, he fails. If he can't shave arm hair with it in the area he was chopping, it doesn't mean you can chop down here and then shave up there. That's not the point. In the area where all the scuff marks are, if it doesn't shave arm hair, it fails. After that, we're going to put 1/3 of the blade, so the blade is allowed to be up to, doesn't have to be, but up to 10 inches long. Cannot be more than 2 inches wide, cannot be longer than 15 inches total. That's the maximum. It can be smaller. The smaller it is, the harder it is to do. We're going to put 1/3 of the blade in this vise, and then if needed, he's got a cheater bar here. He can slip over the handle. We're going to bend the knife 90 degrees, and it should bend in an arc, right? Not bending like a sheet of cardboard. It'll bend as an arc, so it's 90 degrees like this, right? Does that make sense? If you're standing here, you'll be able to see it. And then return. It does not have to return to completely straight. The blade cannot break. The edge cannot chip, although the edge is allowed by the old standard, which it shouldn't. It's allowed to crack up to 1/3 the width of the blade. All right. So that's what we're going to do. And this is not, like I said, this is not a way of saying this is what all knives should do. My knife don't do this. A knife needs to do this if it needs to do it. So what it's saying is, does Billy understand his steel, his process, his edge geometry to make it thin enough to go through this, thick enough to survive chopping, good enough edge retention to survive keep a good edge, and also enough flexibility to not break. So we're trying to balance a bunch of things that would be very unlikely to put into one knife. And so that's what this test is here to prove. This isn't a setup, this is a real test. If he fails, he has to wait 6 months to try this again. So he can do this, you can do this as many times as you want in your own shop by yourself. But when you say this is a test, then it becomes real. So it has to be supervised by an ABS Mastersmith. That's me in this case, but you can travel to anybody you wanted to, anytime. We've all imposed on other people's time to have this test done when we were doing it. So when you call me to impose on my time, it's a privilege for me to give you my time and do that for you. So part of the deal.
It's a privilege for you to do this.
Yeah.
It's getting some encouragement.
Congratulations in advance. So we all have our own little things that we do or don't do when it comes to this test. There's some things that any knife it's not you can test with anything you want. There are certain basic parameters and I won't go into, but like I told Billy, I'm not going to check this knife at all before he starts. I used to check the edge and say, no, you might want to sharpen that a little bit more, and he'd mess with it. Like I said to him earlier, it ain't going to get any sharper as it goes, so it's not sharp enough now, it's not going to get any sharper. But there is also, let me tell you guys something, a couple little things. I'm saying this for you too, even if you know, even if you've done this 10,000 times, I'm going to say it because I got to witness a really, really, really bad injury doing this exact thing. So as Americans, if you grew up as a kid playing baseball, you would swing at something like you're standing like this. We're all used to doing that. If you're using a knife, the chances of you putting that knife in your front leg is really high. And you cannot imagine how sharp this knife is. This rope is so much more abrasive than your skin. If it can go through this rope, it can take off a limb. You can not only lose a limb, you can lose your life. We look like we're maybe a little distance from a local hospital. I'm serious. This is really dangerous stuff. So when you do this, it's incredibly important to put your off foot back. It feels awkward, but you have to. And I've started telling people to take your other hand, if you have one, and put it behind your back so that you're not doing this kind of nonsense and get your other hand in the way. People get really like emotionally worked up over this thing and they lose their head. So if you approach it like this, cut it like that, everybody else stands out of the way. It has to have a lanyard on it, so if he loses it, the knife won't end up in the crowd somewhere. Yeah, tighten it so it's actually doing something good. And I'm going to stand down somewhere.
All right, Bill, it's all over.
You're ready.
All right, Billy!
Okay, golf shot here.
Why did I do this in front of a crowd of people?
I don't know, it was your idea. Beautiful. All right. So go straight onto this. As he's doing this, you guys are thinking about donating to support Billy's ministry. You want to raise $10,000. You can raise $20,000. You can afford a full 8-foot 2x4 next time you do this test. And then I can hold on to the other side. Now here's what's going to happen, folks. Hold on, Billy. The bottom of this board is going to break in about 8 licks, and the whole bottom is going to fall off. And you won't have actually cut through it. So before that thing comes off, flip it over. Oftentimes, what you can do is you can put another board underneath the board, and then you ensure that you cut through the whole thing. He can kind of cut through this any way he wants to, but he can't whittle it. He has to be actively chopping. The whole point is to have the edge be strong enough to survive not only the abrasive resistance of the wood, but you know that you're forcing a lot of put a lot of force on this thing. You know, obviously you can flip it over. There we go. The last little bit broke. It's a thing. You know, want to make sure we're mostly going through the whole board.
It's like work.
Yeah.
That's why you're doing it.
Also becomes kind of impressive. You realize that when guys do this in competition, you know, a guy who's really good at this can can do that 2x4 in 5 seconds or less.
We will be doing a cutting competition later in the day as well.
Big Hand Dave can do it in 3 legs.
Huh?
Big Hand Dave can do it in 3 legs.
Anybody named Big Hand anything should be able to do it in one. Sounds like a real sissy to me.
Why didn't y'all bring the Big Hand up here for the competition?
Big Hand.
We should have.
At the Journeyman Smith level, this knife has to be forged by Billy. He has to identify himself. This cannot be ground out of a bar. It does have to be forged. And it has to be a piece of single high carbon steel. It can't be Damascus. It can't be laminated in any way. But the heat treating and all the kind of the minor details are really up to him and what he feels is necessary to make something that will pass this test.
Now, can you send off for some treating?
No. All the work. Listen, the ABS is a fundamentalist organization. So we're part of our mantra. Go ahead and take that lanyard off and hand me the whole thing. Part of our mantra is that everything has to be done by you and you alone. The blade is actually warm right there from the chopping. Okay? All right. I want you to shave arm hair right there because I don't have any arm hair. Okay.
Yeah.
You guys can't see the hair, but you can see the bald spot. Okay? Good job. All right. Now, we're going to, do you have a tape measure right here?
It's right there, fine.
All right. You have a Sharpie? If you don't, we'll just go like this. So I'm going to call the top of your handle, the top of your blade. We're going to call it less than 10, which is a good thing. This is over 10, you just get to go home now.
Right.
You wouldn't have to go far.
I'm already home,
Yeah,
so
see?
that's great.
Right? So we're going to say 3 inches of that. Right at 10, since you don't have a Sharpie, I'm going to have you stand over there, and I'm going to put this at 3. And we'll go right to there. Okay? Get that as tight as you need to. Now, I'm going to say, if you want to stand close, just, do people sign like a waiver to be here? Raise your hand if you didn't know this was dangerous. This is dangerous, okay?
You're going to heaven, right?
Yeah. It's not going to heaven that I'm worried about. It's going to the ER. The American hospital system is a good parallel for the King James Version of hell. So he can put a pipe over this. He's going to put a pipe to cover the handle so I can see this area, and that's what I'm sort of looking at. And I'm going to call this out to you.
Okay.
Nobody else is here. You don't have to bend this fast. You just have to bend it consistently and slow. If you hear anything, if it goes tick, tink, bink, bonk, or sounds terrible, keep going. There's nothing you can do about it. Whatever you do, don't let go quickly, and I'll kind of call it out as you go, and once you get to 90 degrees, you're there. And the ABS trusts me that I have such a highly calibrated eye that I can tell these things by just looking at them. Beautiful thing. 80, 85, and
That's it.
90.
Good job.
Good job. Now the pipe is always going to be past 90. I'm looking at the handle up inside the pipe. So that was well done. So the edge is not cracked. Yeah, this is actually going to be really good for like scooping out watermelons and stuff at this point. The edge hasn't cracked, it hasn't chipped, there's no flat spots on it. So that's a passing knife. Congratulations. Unless you've done this, I promise you have no idea how nerve-wracking that was for him to do this in front of all these people. This is incredibly nerve-wracking to do with one person watching. So that took a lot not to make the knife. It was at least as much work to stand out here in front of everybody to do this. There are also a couple other guys, I think, who want to do this weekend today. So if you don't want to be a demonstration, come up with me and we'll find a nice quiet place where you can do this privately. And that way you can succeed and fail without an audience.